Where else would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and welcome to Football Letter Live. Today, we're wrapping up the season by looking at some of the highlights of this year, and we're also going to speak with the editor of the Football Letter, John Black, to learn more about his time with the publication and how he's kept generations of Penn Staters connected to Penn State and the football program through the Football Letter. Just as he has all season long. John is joining me today, and we're going to dive into his long and storied history with both Penn State football and the university, hear some stories, and ask him what it's like covering the team this season in a way that he's never done it before. And so let's get right into it. John, welcome to our 16th episode of Football Letter Live.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to dive into this. I know we had talked about kind of learning a lot more about you throughout the year, and then we've had some wonderful guests, but today it's all about you, John. And
that's problematic.
Well, I know you've talked about this before, but talk a little bit about how you became a Penn State Nittany Lion.
Okay, well, it was a little bit of a circuitous path. I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, graduated from McCaskey High School. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 12 years old, and my mother was raising myself and two younger sisters. So getting some financial aid was important to me going to a college. And so I worked with our high school counselor, and I wound up having, I had been to Penn State once as a sports editor of the high school newspaper for a conference up here, and really loved the campus and everything that I saw. And, you know, I was certainly interested in going to Penn State. Unfortunately, the Alumni Association had just recently started their alumni scholarships, and I was selected as an alternate. I didn't have only if somebody else who had already been offered turned it down would I get an alternate. But I did get a scholarship to Michigan and one to the University of Southern California. As a 17-year-old, I had never been out of the state of Pennsylvania, basically, and never flown on an airplane. So I opted to go to Southern Cal. It was a scholarship, an academic scholarship in engineering. And I had loved my high school math and physics and scientific subjects. And I thought I was heading towards being an engineer until I got to Southern Cal. And I was getting A's in my English and history and social studies, all my liberal arts subjects. But I was struggling when I hit calculus. That really got me. I loved, all the high school maths. And boy, I hit calculus, and the instructor that I had was a graduate student from India. I had, growing up in Lancaster County, I could understand a Pennsylvania Dutch accent, but I had trouble working with an Indian accent, even though it was the English language. But at any rate, I wound up getting mediocre grades, shall we say, in calculus and in physics, and my scholarship was not continued at the end of the year. So I had no money to fly home. I walked downtown to the Marine Corps recruit depot and signed up in Los Angeles, and went to basic training at Marine Corps recruit depot in San Diego, and after that in Camp Pendleton. Wow. And assigned, oddly enough, to a pioneer, an engineering battalion at Camp Pendleton. But then after I got out of the Marine Corps, after I had served my time and was honorably discharged, I was all set to head back to Pennsylvania. I had applied for admission to Penn State as a transfer student. I had saved up my money while I was in the Marine Corps, and I had even bought an old used car and drove all across the country coming home. That after I worked out there that summer, actually, after I'd gotten out of the Marine Corps, working digging ditches with the construction crew, putting in gas pipelines to new housing developments.
Yeah.
So it paid decent money for those days, and it helped get me in shape. Well, I was in shape from the Marine Corps anyway. I was in much better shape in those days than I am now. Let me put it that way. So anyway, so I headed straight back to Penn State. I had not been home basically for about a 3-year period initially, and then I spent about a week at home in Lancaster before I headed straight up for the fall semester at Penn State. So I had my first year, but I could only transfer like 20 credits from Southern Cal to Penn State. And I love Penn State so much, I was planning to be here 4 years anyway. And I was able to take some extra courses my senior year and that sort of thing. That it worked out great for me. I had one thing I had done out at Southern Cal, of course, right very early. I signed up for the Daily Trojan out there because I had been sports editor of my high school paper, wanted to continue it. I got to cover Southern Cal games, home games in the Coliseum, and really enjoyed that. So I did likewise when I got back to Penn State. First day I was on campus, I walked into the Daily Collegiate office and asked talk to the sports editor, who happened to be Lou Prado. Lou, our famous Penn State historian, great guy. He was a senior. I mean, yeah, he was in his senior year. He was the sports editor for the Daily Collegian. I asked if I could sign on as a sports writer, and he took me under his wing, and everything I basically know about sports writing and Penn State, I learned from the best, from Lou Prado.
You know, you mentioned the Daily Collegian, John, but you were active in a number of student organizations. You were a student athlete for a while at Penn State. You were on the collegiate staff. I know you were a member of the Acacia fraternity. Talk about your time as a student at Penn State.
Well, I loved the campus. I loved the atmosphere. I was interested in a lot of things. I probably put as much time into my extracurricular activities as I did into my academic classes, but I was able to maintain a good average here. So I felt it was worthwhile. I was learning a lot about interacting with other people and a lot of very enjoyable activities. And I wound up in a couple of honorary organizations and that sort of thing as well. So when you say I was an athlete, it was a very short-lived time, shall we say. I played on my high school team, but I actually played I played quarterback at McCaskey behind George Dara, who back in the 54-55 period was the all-state quarterback in Pennsylvania. And he got a scholarship, athletic scholarship to Penn State. He was only stayed up here 1 year because he had a girlfriend back home that he missed, and he just wanted to get back to Lancaster. So he actually transferred back to Franklin and Marshall College, played 4 years for Franklin and Marshall, went on and played several years in the NFL with the Washington Redskins, I know. But at any rate, so I had played behind him, didn't get a whole lot of playing time in high school, but place where I got the most playing time was in the Marine Corps because I was the quarterback of our battalion team there. So at any rate, I got the nerve to contact Rip Engel and ask if I could walk on for spring practice my freshman year there. And after some consideration, he he said, okay, but he was concerned. He knew I was a sports writer in the Daily Collegian, and he just didn't want me being there to try to, get an inside story on the football team and that sort of thing. So he kind of checked that out first with my high school and my Marine Corps thing. So he let me come out. And of course, Joe Paterno was the quarterback coach at Penn State at that time, an assistant. So I had all that. I had that spring practice under my belt, and I actually got to play in the blue-white game in 1959. And at the end of that time, I decided that rather than sitting on the bench for 4 years behind the likes of Richie Lucas and Dick Hoke and Don Jonas and Galen Hall, they were all ahead of me. And I figured maybe I'd better concentrate on the sports writing with the Collegian, and I actually ended up as editor-in-chief eventually of the Collegian. So it turned out to be a good decision that I made. But I did get to play in that blue-white game, and actually Roger Kaufman was one of our All-Americans at that time, a great tailback, great running back. And the best thing I can remember about that blue-white game was, of course, we played both ways in those days.
Right.
Defensively, I was a defensive back. And in that game, he broke loose around left end, and he was headed on a breakaway touchdown run. But I did get an angle on him, and I tackled him well before he got close to the end zone. But I really had my bell rung. I got up, I was seeing stars. I was a little woozy, but I managed to hang on till the practice was over. And but I actually made a good decision after that was all over, and that was the extent of my playing career, shall we say, at Penn State. And it was never any place except on the practice field. And at that time it was not Beaver Stadium, of course. This goes way back to Beaver Field, which was up next to the Nittany Lion Inn and Rec Hall.
Right.
That's where the field was located in those days, and that's the only place I ever played.
So when you look back on your relationship with Joe, Joe was your coach, and then
Right.
you covered Joe with the Collegian, and then later on in your career worked with him through the Alumni Association and the football letter. How did you approach that relationship with him? First, did he remember you as the guy who was in his quarterback's room, first of all, or talk a little bit about your evolving relationship with Joe Paterno?
Well, that was the most amazing thing, that he did remember me. I was dumbfounded. I had just that one spring practice under his tutelage with all these other guys ahead of me, and they were getting most of his attention and all the playing time. But it was a couple of years after I had graduated, and I was working for the United States Information Agency in New York at the United Nations. And I went to a meeting of the Penn State Alumni Chapter in New York. And Joe was the featured speaker. So it caught my attention. I signed up, and I went down to my first Alumni Association chapter meeting, and walking in, and he's standing at the door greeting everybody coming in. And I walked up to him. I reached out to shake my hand. He says, "Oh, hi, John. How you been?" My God, I was floored. He even remembered my name. But he had a fantastic memory. He remembered everybody that he came in contact with, and I was so impressed. And actually, by that point in time, he had wound up during our senior year. Right. Marrying a classmate of mine. Sue Paterno was a classmate of mine at Penn State. We were both in poli-sci classes together and knew each other, not real well, but had a passing acquaintance in college. And of course, I've learned to know her much more deeply in the passing years. But it's amazing that he did, because I had never done anything to impress him, certainly on the field, and I was amazed. So I've been honored to have the opportunity to work with him through my years working at the Alumni Association from 1970 on, and especially from 1976 during the football letter. But that's when I left New York and left the job at the United Nations as UN correspondent for USIA. I did that to come back to Penn State as editor of the alumni publications on the Alumni Association staff. So,
John, you know, we have a great relationship with the library, and we were recently digging through the archives, and we found an interview from the mid-'70s with Ridge Riley and Joe Paterno. And it's really interesting how Joe looked at the football letter and his relationship with Ridge, your predecessor in the football letter role, that Joe saw that as the main avenue of getting information out about the football program to alumni. Could you sense that early on, after you started writing the letter, kind of the reverence that and the importance that Coach Paterno put on it?
Well, surely. I mean, Ridge was revered by everybody. He was known as Mr. Penn State, and he originated the football letter just basically the year after I was born. I was born in 1937. He started in the fall of 1938, originated the football letter, although obviously I didn't know anything about it then. And Ridge was, a lot of people have said, Ridge was something of a father figure to Joe when he became the head coach at a young age in his late 30s, when he became the head coach at Penn State. And Ridge would go to Joe's house every Sunday morning after a football game, have breakfast with Joe and Sue, and talk directly about the football letter and about the game and the team. And of course, Ridge was making all these notes about that he would use in the football letter. When Ridge died, in Joe's having a heart attack in Joe's living room, talking to him a few days after the Sugar Bowl game of 1975, where we lost to Alabama. Joe, I mean, of course, Ridge was in the process of writing this famous history book about Penn State football, Road to Number One. He had just had this one remaining chapter to do on the 1975 season. His widow, Peg Riley, asked me if I would write that chapter for his book because they had a contract to come out in the spring of 1976. And what I did was researched all of his football letters that year and drew that last chapter from his writing, not my original writing, basically from researching his writing. So I wrote that, and then in that spring, the Alumni Association Executive Board was dealing with the issue of replacing Ridge as the football letter writer, and I was asked if I would be interested. I said, well, I'd give it a shot for a year or two and see how things went. And of course, that's 45 years ago. Yeah, that was my very first football letter. Of course, obviously, it was printed publication in those days.
Right.
And it came out several days after the game itself. It had to be written in a feature style. The alumni wouldn't get it until probably Thursday after the game,
right,
by a second-class mail. But through the years, things picked up. We increased the size of the letter. When Ridge started with, it was actually a mimeograph publication for the first couple of years, and then it became a printed publication off of a flatbed press with hot lead type. And that's the way it started out when I started, with still hot lead type on a flatbed press, and rolled off and mailed out. But there have been a number of changes through the years, all the way up to the last, almost about the last decade, when we've been online. Now we can use color. I mean, instead of those tiny little black and white photographs that I was able to work into the printed letter,
Right.
we now can run 50 to 75 full color photographs that the reader can blow up full size on his screen. And it's just, it's, to me, that's the biggest advantage of being online, in addition to getting it on Monday afternoon rather than the following Thursday. But at any rate, it's the football letter has seen a great transition from the days when Ridge was one of a handful of reporters in the press box. He said no more than half a dozen, because you'd have somebody from just maybe the 4 or 5 leading papers in the state, and himself with the football letter. And then it obviously has grown to where we have probably up around 300 reporters in the press box these days.
Yeah.
But the thing that I started out on here was with Joe. Now, obviously, I didn't have the same close relationship with Joe that Ridge did, but I continued the first 2 years of writing the football letter. I was invited to Joe's house on Sunday morning and have breakfast with Joe and Sue and John Morris, who was our sports information director at Penn State at that time. And John and I had known each other as students at Penn State. He was he graduated a year after I did, and he was the sports editor of the Daily Collegian at that time. So we knew each other well. And so the two of us went and had these same sessions like Ridge had. And we would hear some things that Ridge didn't talk about at his post-game press conference, so forth. Some of them we could use, and others were just for our information, shall we say, that may help us out in understanding some things that he wouldn't talk about publicly. But very quickly, by then he had offers to go pro and had not. He stayed at Penn State. He had those great seasons in '68 and '69, and of course the early '70s were still excellent football. And it just was growing so fast that by the third year that I was writing a football letter, they were having meetings on Sunday morning of the entire coaching staff, and he didn't have time for John and I in that form. And although I did for a couple more years, I did get to fly on the plane with the team going to the away games, and then that ended. And, we went commercial from that time, but very quickly the Alumni Association get into having big events at away games for alumni at the location of each game, working with the local chapters in the cities where we were traveling to. On Friday night, having big events with the local chapters, and then Friday or Saturday mornings having pregame pep rallies before the games itself. So, as an alumni staff, the members of the staff that were involved in all of these things would fly out on Fridays, and we'd be out there at least Friday afternoon and evening, and before the team ever came out. Of course, we didn't get back till Sunday eve. He was flying right back after the game. We didn't fly out till Sunday.
Well, we have had a lot of fun over the years traveling to games and attending alumni events. And so what are some of some really meaningful interactions that you've had with Penn Staters through those events, through through being the editor of the Football Letter. I'm sure people probably feel like they know John Black because they see your name in their inbox or your name in their mailbox for years.
Well, it has been a fantastic opportunity for 45 in the 45th year now. And that was Marge Senti, a former member of the Penn Staters staff who retired in Sedona, California. And she and her husband attended the Fiesta Bowl game in 2000, after the 2017 season went out there. And of course, this was the big gathering for the last Rose Bowl that we played in 2006, after the 2016 season. More than 10,000 people filled several blocks of a major thoroughfare there, right outside the entertainment and restaurant district in the heart of Los Angeles. I've never been involved in a better pep rally than that one. And you were privileged to lead that.
Yes, that was a lot of fun. I tell people we'll always remember the day that we played the Staples Center or outside the Staples Center with 12,000 of our closest friends.
Right. That was phenomenal. And we had Rich Maudie as one of the guests there who had done such a great job with the group of seniors that stayed with us back after the 2011 season and really held the Penn State football team together. He and Mike Zordich and several others leaders that were just fantastic. But at any rate, so yes, it's things like that I remember at individual away games, individual bowl games, the Alumni Association events that were held in conjunction with the local chapter and with the traveling Penn Staters. And it's been just a fantastic opportunity through the years, as you can imagine, in not only the away games during the regular season, but I was privileged. Ridge, well, he wrote that book, Road to Number One.
Right.
He never had the opportunity to actually write about the Penn State national championship season because he died in the first week of 1976. I was privileged within the first 10 years of writing the Football Letter. I got to write about two national championship teams, 1982 and 1986. And I just felt so privileged to have that opportunity. And I just thought about Ridge all the time in those 2 years, because he was the founder of the Football Letter. He was the author of one of our most definitive books about Penn State football history. And he didn't. And he only got, I'm trying to think, he only got to go to 3 or 4 bowl games in his tenure.
Oh, really?
Maybe a few more than that. I mean, of course, he didn't make the Rose Bowl in 1922, but in 47, the big Cotton Bowl team, undefeated, right, and played SMU to a tie down there, one of the great defensive teams of all time. And then, 1960, when I was a student writing for the Daily Collegian, I got to cover the 1959 and 1960 Liberty Bowls. These were the first 2 Liberty Bowls, and they were held in Philadelphia, played in Memorial Field in about this time in December or this coming week. Colder than all get out. That was a bowl game. First one was with Alabama.
Right.
Bear Bryant's very first bowl game as the coach of Alabama. He brought his team up here. First time Alabama ever played against a team with African-American players. And Bear was perfectly happy with that. He was wide open.
Right.
They weren't doing it at their home games yet,
at that time, but
Right.
Bear meant nothing. He didn't think anything of it. And we had about at least three or four African-American players then on the Penn State team. And then the next year we played in the Liberty Bowl again against Oregon. So obviously Ridge was writing the football letter about those. And then my senior year, we met Georgia Tech in the Gator Bowl. That was probably only this, well, yeah, it may have been the first. I'm trying to think if that was the very first bowl game that Penn State ever played in Florida. The Cotton Bowl, of course, in '47 was in Texas, and the Rose Bowl back in '22 was in California. But at any rate, I digress. I'm sorry, I get carried away.
Oh no, that is wonderful. It's
But
good to hear all the memories.
In my time, just writing the football letter, I've been privileged to cover 35 bowl games, a total of 41 if I count the ones that I covered or went to either as a student or a young staff member at the Alumni Association.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And,
John, not only have Penn Staters gotten to know you, but they've gotten to know Vita Kay, your wife, over the years. I'm not going to let you go without talking about how you and Vita Kay met.
Well, it's interesting. I, as you mentioned, I was in Acacia fraternity up here, and 2 years behind me, another young man from Lancaster County came to Penn State and joined my fraternity, and also joined the Daily Collegian staff. But he was a business major, and he was on the business side of the Collegian staff. And he happened to have a high school sweetheart by the name of Vita Kay, who went to nursing school at Harrisburg Polyclinic Hospital. And while he was up here at Penn State, he would bring her up for big weekends and big fraternity parties. And I met her actually in that way. By that time, he was pinned to her. So I always enjoyed talking with her. Let me say that when she was there, but
Right.
never went beyond chatting, But I was impressed with her, not only her appearance, but her personality and her dedication to wanting to work as a nurse and helping people, not only as a nurse, but she's just always been a very helpful person in so many ways. So at any rate, I only get into this story because as I was wrapping up my senior year, the outgoing business manager of the Daily Collegian recommended that Herb Whitmer be his replacement as the new business manager for the succeeding year, for the 1962-63 year. And the Collegian Board of Directors approved that. And then a week later, they were meeting again to select the editor who would succeed me as editor-in-chief of the Daily Collegian. And I thought about who I would recommend because I thought the best the best upcoming senior members of our Collegian staff, reporters, writers, were females. And the Daily Collegian had never had, up to that point in time, a female editor-in-chief. And I felt that one particular woman was the best reporter we had, the best writer, was very organized. So I recommended to the board of directors that she be selected as the incoming chief. Of course, they interviewed other people, but they agreed and they selected her to be the new editor of the Daily Collegian, Ann Palmer. But I had, it occurred to me as I thought about things that I knew from experience that the editor and the business manager had to work very closely together every day to get out a quality publication under budget and that sort of thing.
Right.
So I knew that she'd have to be working very closely with her during these years. But at any rate, I graduated. I'm down in Washington working for the U.S. Information Agency. And it was the next May of 1963 that I get a phone call from another fraternity brother. He said, hey, did you know that Herb and Vita Kay have broken up? And Herb and Ann are together now. And I said, no, I didn't know that, but that's interesting. I picked up the phone, gave her a call. I said, do you happen to be planning to go to Lancaster to visit your mother on Mother's Day weekend here in about 10 days? And she said, yes, I was planning to do that. I said, well, I'm planning to drive up from Washington and visit my mother for the weekend. Would you be interested in going out on a date? She said yes, and the rest is history.
That is a wonderful story, and I'm glad that we have that now on tape for perpetuity. But I love it. I love it. John, you've switching back to the football letter and to Penn State football, this year was probably like any other year, was like no other year that you've ever covered Penn State football. What was it like covering the team this year with the COVID-19 guidelines in place and everything that's been going on?
Well, it was just obviously unique. I mean, totally unprecedented, nothing like it before, and hopefully not afterwards.
Right.
But to go into an empty Beaver Stadium and sit up there in the press box when you'd normally be looking out at 106,000 or more rabid fans, and to look at empty concrete stands and steel girders and aluminum benches that just had no warmth, no personal warmth at all. You're looking at these cold, dank structures with virtually no human habitation. Yes, there were small little groups of parents and families of the players that were allowed into the games, but they didn't take up 1/10 of the room that the cardboard cutouts in the south end zone took up. So it just was not the same atmosphere at all. You didn't have the same free reign in the press box. You got in there, you were assigned to a seat, you stayed in that seat the entire length of the game. After the game, you were able to, Coach Franklin conducted his post-game press conference via Zoom. We'd sit up there,
right.
Zooming in from the press box, and the same way with the selected players. And that was the extent. So different from a lively, vibrant, a lot of bantering back and forth press box to a sterile environment in a sterile press box in a sterile stadium, looking out at teams playing almost as if they're playing inter-squad scrimmages or something. I mean, I just felt so hard, sorry if that's the appropriate term, for the players. They did have their parents there, and that's all. Not the 100,000 fans rooting them on and cheering them, and particularly in a whiteout situation that we didn't have for Ohio State. That made it such a different, just unbelievably different atmosphere. And how could they really get into the game and give it their all and get excited about playing? I mean, they did their best, and obviously through the year they learned to live with it and deal with it. And even a lot of the pro teams are doing that today. But at any rate, it was just so very different and so difficult to come up with the same feeling about it.
Then, of course, the away games, we watched on television.
Right.
And sat here taking our notes and making our, writing down our information and making notes that we would, again, have the opportunity of hearing the post-game press conference with the coach, even at the away game location via Zoom.
Right.
But that was just a very different way of covering. After all the away games, we kind of get used to it. But that's what it's been, and it's just such a totally different environment. And I think it took the Nittany Lions a while to adapt to that atmosphere themselves, as witnessed by the way the season turned out for us. But
Right.
thank goodness they got it turned around here at the end, and it's just been such a different atmosphere, different team, a spirit. They still, they couldn't even practice together because of social distancing. That the whole team could never practice together. You met with your position coaches in the meeting rooms during the week. You worked out with them. You did most of your practice sessions with them. And if you got the whole team out on the field at the same time, they were socially distanced, and the practice was very different from what it had ever been before. And how you mold a team spirit and the camaraderie that has always before been built up through the close interactions with all of the team members was a real challenge, a very difficult challenge this year, and a challenging thing for the coaches to work with them in that way and devise plans and schedules for getting the best workout that they could and the best game plan and working it together, offense and defense and special teams and so forth for the season. It's just unbelievable experience.
John, as you think back on 45 years of the football letter and all the games you've covered and the people you've met and the bowl games you've gone to, what are some of your most treasured memories?
The treasured memories are always the personal interactions that I had with alumni, and it's not fair for me to try mentioning names and that sort of thing, because there've been so many through the years and in different ways, and some that I'd see every year at the bowl games, even if I didn't see them all year in between, or that I'd see at several away games. Some alumni traveled to more than one away game each year. And of course, seeing the local alumni at the site of the away games, that was a special treat every time. And it's always been the personal interactions that I was privileged to have with other Penn State alumni, talking about football, talking about the team, and talking about the university in which they had such great pride, and how the football team does such a great job of representing the university. Because right from Joe Paterno's days on, and I'm sure Rip Bangon, the coaches before him too, but they built that kind of, they built a family atmosphere, and they built a student athlete that was a legitimate student to begin with, as well as being an excellent athlete. And Joe just built that great grand experiment that was his hallmark in his early years of coaching. And you had to be a good student. If you weren't going to class, you weren't maintaining your grade point average, you didn't play. And if it got that bad, you weren't no longer on the team. But they had the opportunities, and they had, some, of course, eventually good guidance from athletic tutoring department and that sort of thing. And they all had to perform in the classroom before they were allowed to
perform on the field. So they've, and just the way they present themselves has always been something that Penn Staters could be proud of, representing their university. And football, being our flagship sport, drawing so many alumni to every game and event, was a wonderful way to build the spirit and the engagement of alumni in many other ways. And, you know, all of the most active alumni volunteers and those who are most deeply engaged with the university, the vast majority of them are great football fans. And that's not to detract from being fans of other sports as well. I mean, basketball, wrestling, volleyball, hockey, so many sports. And that same atmosphere persists that was built, first of all, I think, through the football program, and then other sports as well. And the coaches of those sports have followed that lead. And we've had a lot of great coaches from through the years. Again, I don't want to mention a few and not the whole crew, but it's just been a great way of, and these things all were the kind of things that went into building the rapport between the university and alumni that has allowed this Penn State Alumni Association to become the biggest and the most comprehensive in the services that they provide of any alumni association in the country, in the world, actually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, John, you've seen me do this on Coffee Hour, but we're going to put you on the spot here and do a lightning round and just ask you about some of your favorite things. So as you think back, what was your favorite class that you took at Penn State?
Oddly enough, I have to say my senior year, one of these classes that I was able to take because I had accumulated enough credits by then to graduate. But the last semester of my senior year, I was just taking courses I really was interested in and always wanted to hear things, learn things about, was a political geography class with Pierce Lewis. And that was fascinating. It merged my interest in geography, which I've always loved, and political science, which was actually my major. In college, I majored in political science, minored in journalism, had a Russian area, completed a Russian area studies certificate with history and political courses about Russia, the Soviet Union, as well as U.S. So that was my single favorite class.
Great.
Great.
How about your favorite building on campus?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'd have to say it was Old Main, because that's where I spent from 1970 to when was it? 1997.
Right.
When the Alumni Association was located there. That's where I went every day to work on the Alumni Association staff. And it was also where some student organizations had opportunities to do things as well. But from 1997 up to the present day, it had to be the Alumni Center on campus, which initially was just the old president's residence. Right. And then in 2001, we were able to open the beautiful new addition, the alumni, new alumni part of the,
right.
The whole thing together is now the Alumni Center, but we've got this newest part with some amazing facilities and beautiful rooms for alumni to feel at home when they come back. And that's where alumni council meetings are held and a lot of special events from homecoming to a long litany of.
Absolutely.
Yes.
John, many Penn Staters would list you amongst their favorite writers. Who's your favorite writer?
Okay, well, Lou Prado for his Penn State books that he's written about the Penn State football and the Penn State experience. I don't know how to single out other people because of the types of writing that they do. I'm a fan of nonfiction. I read very little fiction at all, but I love National Geographic and I love Penn State publications and Pennsylvania publications about the university other than football or sports.
Right.
That's my reading list.
Your besides football, I'm trying to couch this because I know it's probably football, but besides Penn State football, what's your favorite sport?
Well, I'm gonna split it up here.
Okay.
As a men's sport, it's wrestling.
Right.
As a women's sport, it's volleyball. So wrestling and women's volleyball would be next on my list behind football.
That's great. And finally, what is your favorite flavor of Creamery ice cream?
That may be the toughest one of all because I'm a connoisseur of ice cream, and you can't find better ice cream than the Creamery ice cream. And I know there are a couple of other Big Ten schools that have their own creamery, right. Michigan State and Wisconsin, and they do a good job of it, but they don't come up to Penn State standards. Right. So Penn State Creamery ice cream, I think I'd have to say Keeny Beanie chocolate.
Okay.
And I say that not only I love the flavor, the chocolate with the chocolate chips, and Keeny Beanie, of course. Phil Keeney was the head of the food science department for many years, and the Creamery reported to him, and he worked very closely with the Creamery, and the flavor was named after Phil. And then when we moved to the village at Penn State here 2.5 years ago, one of our famous residents here was Phil Keeney. And God rest his soul. He just passed away about a month to 6 weeks ago. And a wonderful guy, just a great human being. And for his sake, as well as the flavor, I'd have to go with Keeny Beanie.
That's great. John, we showed the picture of the Rose Bowl there and that big pep rally.
Oh, yes.
In the role that I have at the Penn State Alumni Association, I get to do a lot of really neat things. But the past 16 weeks, talking Penn State football with you is amongst the most fun I've had on the job. And so I just thank you so much for spending all that time with us talking about Penn State football and this new endeavor of Football Letter Live. So I'm so grateful.
Thank you very much. You've done a fantastic job here, Paul, and I've just been amazed at how much you know and how intimately you've always been involved with Penn State, even though you didn't have your undergraduate experience here.
Yeah.
You certainly, through your family and your interests, followed a lot about the university and Penn State football. And certainly that's just all been come to fruition in your 5 years here. And we're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Well, that's it. Another edition of Football Letter Live is in the books, edition 16. We're so grateful, John, for you for co-hosting this season. We're so grateful for our audience who continues to tune in with us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on season 2 of Football Letter Live. Until then, we are
Penn State.